Hi, welcome to Midwest Magic Cleaning. My name is Jim Cotta, and that is officially the most obscure joke I've ever made on the channel. For the 5 of you who actually got that, congratulations, we are now married. This week's video is really special for multiple reasons. The first is that this is a video showing Bonnie from A Beautiful Mess cleaning a very different type of cleanup. She's one of my best friends, and she is a workhorse, as well as an organization master. The second reason is that she's helping organize a really hoarded office for a woman named Mira who has her own YouTube channel called Peeling Away the Clutter. Mira has some pretty substantial health problems, but quite a while back she decided to get her house in order even though she has mobility issues, extreme energy issues, and I would put names to the health problems, but we'll just go ahead and bypass that and say that it was from a lifetime of her pro wrestling career. That stuff catches up with you after a while. Mira has been battling hoarding disorder for a very long time, and when she made the decision to clean up the house and get her house back in order and basically take back her house, she was only able to do it small sections at a time. So many of her videos would be like, today all we're focused on is clearing off this one bookshelf. The advantage to being friends with Bonnie is that Bonnie is just a tornado of organization. So when she gets into the room, she can just go crazy and work at warp speed. However, when you're working with somebody who has this disorder and they've decided to help themselves and to make a positive effort, you can't just go in and say, all right, go in the other room, I'm going to speed through this and throw all the junk away and keep what's good and organize it in the way that I think is best. You have to remember that this is a neuropsychological disorder. This is not a choice that somebody made to live like this. So in order to make sure that we don't accidentally trip a trauma switch, everything that she picks up needs to be seen by Mira. And it's almost like panning for gold. You're going to go through the items and get rid of all the obvious junk, but Mira needs to see it and say, no, that's junk, throw it away, or that's okay, but I don't need it anymore. Let's donate that. So in that perspective, it's like getting rid of all the sand so that you can see if there are gold nuggets in there. Doing this is a very slow, very tedious process, but it's also very necessary. The idea is that we basically skim off all the true junk, and then at some point down the line, we skim through it again. And the point is that we're going to skim off the junk layer by layer until we get down to the things that are necessary and truly wanted in order to have a nice, clear living space. But you can't do this all at once. There is a trauma response that can happen. And there are documented cases of people going too fast and slipping into such a severe depression that they end up committing suicide. Not because they threw stuff away. That's not what causes it. It's because the speed and the anxiety that is thrust upon them gets so heavy that their brains can't take it. Now, this can be frustrating for the person who's helping out, but you have to remember that it's equally as frustrating to the person who's receiving the help. When you get through the random miscellaneous stuff and you get to the things that they actually hoard, which is often, in most cases, shoes, clothing, bags, magazines, and books, and then sometimes food. That's where the decisions get difficult, and that's when they get frustrating, because if you show them 10 pieces of clothing in a house that's hoarded, oftentimes 9 of those pieces need to be donated or thrown away.
Oh my gosh. There's the culprit right there.
But oftentimes, the exact opposite happens. They'll keep 9 of them and throw 1 away. That's not really fixing the problem, but you can't force yourself upon them and give them crap and start to get negative about it and say, why are you keeping this? This needs to go. You haven't seen it in 5 years. You're never going to wear it. That logic makes sense to a person who doesn't have hoarding disorder. People who have hoarding disorder do not operate on the same baseline logic as you. That neuropsychological disorder disrupts that and creates a new baseline for logic. That's what they're trying to override. It's the same as telling a person who's suffering from depression to just smile more. It doesn't work. It's kind of a nonsense piece of advice. One of the main things that people in this situation have to battle is getting over the idea of objects having potential that will never be realized. An example of that would be finding scrap wood that has no use to anyone. It's just extra scrap wood taking up space case in a craft room. It's damaged, it's not really useful, but the person with the disorder may look at it and say, oh, let's keep it because I can build like a rustic birdhouse out of that later. You know that they will never build that birdhouse, but in their mind, the potential for that object overrides the logic that it's never going to happen. Someone who's not used to dealing with hoarding disorder can get frustrated at that point, and probably will, and can even get mad and think to themselves, well, yeah, you can also make a bunch of toothpicks out of that, but let's be honest, you're never going to, because that's insanity. And that's kind of the problem with the average person helping out somebody with this disorder. It's very quick to jump towards like insane. It's easy to view people as entitled or difficult or combative because all those sorts of things are going to come up while you're going through their stuff. And it's very difficult to make yourself stop and understand that those reactions are built out of panic and extreme anxiety. They can't change those initial reactions without practice. It would be like trying to change their height. It's a part of who they are, and by trying to force them to do things that they're not mentally ready to do, it's like you trying to change their height by cutting their feet off. The reason I'm telling you all this is because I constantly get people asking me how to help a friend or a family member or a neighbor who has this disorder. They ask, what do I do? How do I approach this without offending them or making them mad? Do I just go in when they're not home and clean it all up? Do I call CPS or APS? At this point, I'm fearing for their health. What can I do personally to help these people out? Well, let's talk about that. If you have a friend who's addicted to heroin, the solution to them getting clean is to not just take away their heroin cold turkey. They can literally die from the shock of withdrawal. There has to be a professional involved, and they have to be weaned off of it. Now, that's an extreme comparison, so don't think I'm comparing heroin addiction to hoarding disorder in that manner, but the technicalities and mechanics of those situations are very, very similar. In the case of somebody with hoarding disorder, you're literally retraining the brain, which takes a massive amount of time. So my suggestion, if you need to intervene and you fear for somebody's safety in these situations, is to, number one, have a one-on-one, basically like an intervention, one in which you don't blame them. And that's a really common problem when somebody who's not trained to handle those situations goes to confront somebody who's in that situation. So in other words, they may confront them and say, this house has to be fixed. This is absolute craziness. You're going to end up dying in here. I'm willing to come in and clean this entire place up for free, but you have to make a change. To them, that is an extremely aggressive, invasive way to handle it, and they're going to feel attacked. I'm not just guessing that they're going to feel attacked. I have done hundreds of these places. In phrasing it like that, it comes across as if you're blaming them for the situation and telling them basically your actions have caused this monstrosity and we have to fix that right away, because if left to your own devices, you're going to kill somebody. That style of confrontation boils down to you. Many of my viewers have tried this method with their own family because they're more comfortable confronting family than they are a stranger. So they're more likely to say things like that. Those viewers will tell you firsthand that the person they confronted had a bad reaction, got extremely angry, and they haven't talked for X amount of years since then. It has to be handled with some kid gloves. So the way I would handle it if I were confronting a friend or a family member would be to say, hey, I have some concerns about the house. I think it's gotten to the point where it's so out of hand you don't know where to start in order to fix it. And you're basically phrasing it as you have become a victim of the house, which is true to a certain extent. You need to let them know how that's affecting you and their loved ones. So you would just honestly let them know, look, I can't come over to visit you. Your friends can't come over. That's not healthy for you to not have that sort of human connection. And the thing that's stopping that is the condition of the house. You need to let them know that you feel like it's unsafe. You're concerned about their health. And then you need to let them know that you're willing to help and you're willing to go slow. Or at a bare minimum, you're willing to go at their pace. You need to reassure them that you're not going to throw anything away without them seeing it. But most of all, they need to understand that the reason you're coming to them is not because you're mad at them or that you're disgusted by their house, but because you love them and you're concerned about them. Once you start the actual process, you personally need to be aware that you are going to run into incidents that are going to make you extraordinarily mad. You're going to pick up a lamp that's clearly broken, covered in mouse poop, and just, I don't know, roaches and stuff are embedded in the base of it. You're going to just automatically assume that is completely fine to throw away because it's literal trash. And their reaction could be equally as mad because you were going to throw that away without letting them know. So they're going to put up a fight to keep it. You personally need to understand that it's okay to keep something like that, at least temporarily. You're trying to avoid as much trauma as possible. So when you run into those instances, you can say, oh, okay, I get it. Sorry, I assumed it was junk. It's broken. It's got all this stuff on it. Let me put it over here to the side. And then if you decide you want to throw it away later, we can do that. In almost every case, they will decide after about an hour to go ahead and chuck it. There are major control problems with people people who have hoarding disorder. So because of that, you have to be extraordinarily patient. And most people don't have that level of patience, which is why it's oftentimes better for them to get therapy first and clean later. Now, Mira is not one of those people who goes into a blind panic. And much of the reason for that is because she is prepared to do what's necessary. She's been working on this for a long time. She is mentally and emotionally sound enough at this point that she feels comfortable being a part of the process. It's really important to remember whenever you're doing this that you're not really babying these people or placating them. You're being careful around them because what they're feeling is an extreme amount of embarrassment and guilt. Many of them feel like they've completely failed on the most basic level of being human. There's nothing you can do to make them feel better about that when this first starts. They have to feel those emotions. It's just like the stages of grief. But the goal overall is to get them to the point that you're at where you're seeing this as a positive major progression. The best way that I found to get them into that mode is to ask them what room or what thing they would like to see cleaned the most. What's the most important room to them? Many times you're going to hear, well, the kitchen. I haven't used my kitchen sink or even been able to cook on my stove in 5 years. If you can provide that for them, they will see that progression much quicker than if you just pick a random bedroom and get that all cleaned up. Because you've now given them function and you've given them something that they've missed. To them, that will feel more like a gift and less like they're being imposed on and forced to do something. A common question that both Bonnie and I get a lot is, what do we do with all the stuff? In this specific situation, Bonnie's doing more organizing than cleaning. So she's going to put objects with like objects. So she'll find many boxes that have scattered books and trinkets in them. She'll box together all the books and another box with all the trinkets so that they're easier to find. Then you'll see her taking those things out of the room, and she's finding other storage in the house to temporarily store those things until they can be gone gone through again. So some of this stuff may end up in places like under a bed or in a closet that has enough space to store a few boxes. Some of these things will be donated, so they'll be put in their own special pile. Some of these things will be thrown away, so they'll go in trash bags and be dumpstered. But the biggest thing is to get these things out of the room so that we're not just playing Tetris with a bunch of boxes, because that doesn't really solve anything. That's just organizing a hoard. Now, when I say that certain things are in boxes to be gone through later, that's kind of the second layer of organization when dealing with somebody with this disorder. After you get the initial junk taken care of, you're going to look around and see that you still have way too much stuff. At that point, it's time to start opening boxes and really looking at what they have and saying, what can you get rid of? We need to clear space. We need to take things out of the house. And this is where it's, hopefully they've had enough time to process this, but this is where they need to start making the hard decisions and dealing with what I talked about earlier, which is potential that's never going to be realized. So you'll get situations where you'll be like, okay, here's this wooden thing that I found. I don't know what it's used for. Do we really need this? And they'll say, well, I'd like to keep it because I can make a really cute spice rack out of it. And then you have to confront that logic in a way that doesn't upset them to say, okay, but are you? Are you going to make the spice rack out of it? Because right now your kitchen is inaccessible. You have 240 jars of spices that are in 6 different cabinets. You can't phrase it the way that I'm phrasing it here. This is just what goes on in the head of the organizer. Another thing I often jump to because I'm human is wanting to hand them that thing and say, okay, that's what you're working on today. You're going to turn this into a cute spice rack. When confronted with that, because in my mind, if they're confronted with that, they're going to look at it and say, I really don't want to work on that. And they may decide, okay, I get what you're talking about. Let's get rid of it. I've never done that personally because I think it's rude. And more importantly, it's super passive aggressive. But you have to be able to take those thoughts, those passive aggressive or frustrated or angry thoughts, and figure out a way to nicely confront that idea. And that is extremely difficult for the average untrained person to do. And that's why therapy is such an extremely important part of this process. You're not trying to convince them to see logic. You're trying to treat a mental illness.
Ouch! Dang it, that is the second time I've done that.
Good for you.
Poked myself with a pin and I'm bleeding this time. Do you have a clue what happens now? Oh, I can't sing. Stuff like that. You can cut that out so you don't get demonetized. Although I'm sure AI would never pick that up because I can't sing worth crap.
For those of you who are new to the channel, I normally intersperse these videos with a lot of really dumb dad humor. I just wanted to give you a heads up because this one wasn't filled with comedy, because I think this is one of the most important subjects that I put on the channel, and it deserves some gravity and some actual research and explanation. Also, I'm really tired, so shut up. Also, if you weren't aware, we have a members only section where you get an additional video every week, usually on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. But the biggest thing you can do to help the channel is to hit the subscribe button. We're closing in on 1 million subscribers. We're about to cross 600,000 probably this week or next week. But at the current rate of growth, we may actually hit 1 million by the end of the year. The only thing that I ask for doing these houses for free is the gold plaque, just because I think it looks cool and I kind of want one. The only way I get that is if you subscribe. So hit the subscribe button before I spin kick you straight in the neck, son. If you haven't seen Bonnie on her channel, A Beautiful Mess, that's who's cleaning in this video. I'll leave a link to that in the description. I will also leave a link to Mira's channel called Peeling Away the Clutter. Both are excellent channels, and both of them could use your subscription in the same way that I could. So those subscriptions are what keeps us going and keeps us doing these cleanings for free. Members, I will see you this Wednesday. Everybody else, I'll see you next weekend. Later.